Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And I'm Maurice.
And this is Xanathat Podcast, where Sulin finally has something to do because this week we watched Gold.
Written by Colin Davis.
Directed by Brian Lighthill.
And aired on November 30th, 1981.
So this week we're joined by a new guest.
Yeah.
Maurice. This is the first time we've had a guest in the same time zone as us. That's all I'm going to say. I just wanted to say it made scheduling really easy compared to all of our other crossovers where we've got to navigate around time zones and free time and this one was.
What are you doing?
That's why you guys have to operate. It's time distort 6, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've recorded at some whack times to make this work. 1 in the morning.
Isn't that standard for podcasts?
You know what? I don't know. I actually genuinely don't know when other people record and how they do it, but we try to keep it at a reasonable time, except that one time we were like, you know what? We should record at midnight. That'd be funny. And then we finished and we were like, it wasn't funny.
Where's my coffee?
I'm almost certain.
Well.
I mean, yeah, it was a weekday as well. I'm almost certain you can tell which episode of Zenith that is too, because we just both sound completely over it and
I don't
done.
even remember what episode
Neither
it was.
do I, but I'm sure if you listened through all of them, you would be like, "Yep, this is the one."
So what you're telling us all is you guys are morning people.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other hand, the effects of sleep deprivation are similar to the effects of alcohol, so I've heard. So I've experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, they say it's more dangerous to drive tired than to drive drunk.
Yeah.
Well, you could be having the lovely, lovely reaction like the food on the Space Princess, you know.
Well, I was going to say, why not both tired and drunk?
Yeah.
I actually found that quite convincing because it reminded me of any episode of The Love Boat.
The Love Boat. I've watched one episode of that for some bizarre reason.
My mother used to watch it, so I used to trip into it periodically.
Well, I mean, I walked into the living room when my parents were watching it, and I sat down. I was like, "What are we watching?" And they're like, "It's The Love Boat." And I'm like, "What's The Love Boat?" And they're like, "It's The Love Boat." And I'm like, "I don't know what that means." They're like, "It's a boat where people fall in love." And I'm like, Is that the whole premise? And they're like, yeah.
It was the Pacific Princess. Do we see a similarity to a certain show we're talking about this week? I wonder.
I think there are a lot of parallels to be drawn between this episode and multiple other things, which I suppose is a good segue into.
But before we get into it, and sorry, Maurice, we didn't discuss this when we were sort of mapping this out, but the other guests we've had on have sort of introed with, how they got into Blake 7 or where they first encountered the show and stuff like that. So you want to sort of tell your story or whatever?
All right, here's a tale. I did not see this show. I read about it for years because where I lived, they never aired it. And then, oh my God, 20 years ago or so, I stumbled into some Series D episodes on KTEH down in San Jose. And then I didn't see it again until maybe 2 years ago when I finally just found it. And I watched the whole thing like in a binge. And so it was really interesting, because you had heard a lot about it and then to see the reality of it. But I want to say one thing that is funny, perhaps, because you guys have talked before about what series people like based on where they came into the show. And although I came into Series D first, it's not my favorite. When I watched the whole show, I kind of really liked the first few seasons, and I felt like the change of format didn't do the show any favors in some ways. And I say this as, as like I said, someone who first saw it as Series D. For me personally, the balance is off. Without Blake to counterpoint Avon, and I find Tarrant irredeemably irritating, and I kept wishing he'd get offed, But that said, there are episodes of this series I like, and this episode in particular is one of them.
Yeah, this one's definitely up there, I think.
Yeah,
I think this is sort of where the series turns up a little more sharply towards the end. And I know you guys were staying away from spoilers, so I won't say any more than there's definitely an uptick at the end of the season here. And this is a pretty big step up from some of the previous ones.
For sure, and that's interesting. I mean, I've heard a lot of I guess American fans, talk about Blake Seven as sort of this elusive show that they knew about, but they never got a chance to watch for years.
Well, I mean, it's not really available over here on DVD, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you had to be by a public television station that would carry it, much like Doctor Who, but Doctor Who got carried a lot more, it seems like, than Blake Seven did.
Right.
Well, Doctor Who had 26 seasons. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I actually had a funny little Doctor Who related thing that I used to work in the video game industry, and I wrote the script for a game called Echo the Dolphin Defender of the Future, which was on the Sega Dreamcast. And I wrote all the intro narrations for everything, and they got Tom Baker to do it. So I have Tom Baker reading dialogue I wrote, which is kind of funny.
Wow.
Well, that's actually pretty exciting, in my opinion.
I'll send you guys the audio. It's
Very
pretty
Nice.
Definitely do.
I'm going, Doctor Who is reading my stuff. Hey.
Why was Tom Baker never on Blake 7? Because he would have overshadowed everyone else, right?
But still, like, he could have had his episode,
Well, he was too busy fighting Cybermen somewhere,
He was too busy not acting.
Well, Tom Baker plays Tom Baker, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure by this point, we were after Tom Baker's Series 18. I read this morning, actually, somebody compares Series A through C as Tom Baker's Series 14 through 17 and Series D as Tom Baker's Series 18. I thought that was an interesting comparison, actually.
Yeah. It's interesting. The thing I wanted to come back to when I talked about like the different series, I think that it's like when we talk about like rock bands and sometimes, the sum is greater than the total of its parts. I kind of feel like with TV shows sometimes that even if, Terry Nation's not the best writer or hasn't got the best plots, there's something about the combination of the people who are working on it that you get a certain, balance. And then when an element gets pulled out, it sort of throws things a little off kilter. And to me, that's what Series D feels like. It feels like once they lost the Liberator and they lost the format, and you have, without Terry Nation there, it just sort of goes on this kind of odd little parallel trajectory that isn't quite to my taste most of the time, especially because of Tarrant, who I didn't like even in Series C. I just want to punch a little git.
I think that's a recurring theme among...
Yeah, you won't have heard it at this point because it's not out yet, but by the time this episode goes out, it will be. In Sand, we rail into Tarrant pretty harshly.
Yeah, all the characters, they're all kind of, snarky to one degree or another. But, at least the other characters, I feel like they have moments where they're kind of appealing. And I don't ever find him appealing, except here where he's in that pretending to be stoned out of his mind. That's the only time I've ever liked him.
I'm on board with that. Terrence not my favorite guy.
Well, I think Terrence just what's the word I'm looking for?
I agree with at this point. I agree with Sergeant Drano's assessment of call a lesser replacement to a better character a Tarrant.
Yeah. So I want to comment a little bit about the kind of story this is, and there are a lot of episodes that have a caper aspect to them, like Pressure Point. But just as Mission to Destiny was the show's whodunit segment, Gold is as heist movie as Blake 7 ever got. And that's the reason I jumped on the opportunity to join you guys on it, because I like capers. I got into them when I was hired to rewrite a heist film, which is currently stuck in development hell. And I watched a lot of them as homework, and I'm a big fan of like the 1956 French caper Bob Le Flambeur, for instance. And, the old show Mission Impossible is a pretty fair example of how you do caper stories on television. The basic rule being that you come up with this intricate plan, and when things inevitably go wrong, everyone has to improvise. And that's sort of, to me, the tip-off of what kind of show it's going to be when you see that. I don't know if you know who Ken Levine is. He's a screenwriter, wrote for Cheers and a lot of other shows. He blogged in a review of Ocean's 8 that some of the factors that go into a good caper movie are the stings are ingenious, the person being robbed deserves it, the crew must pull off seemingly impossible tasks. Despite all the precision planning, things go wrong and the crew must improvise to avoid getting caught. And in short, nothing comes easy.
Wow, that must be why the original Ocean's 11 sucks.
I was going to say.
Yeah, to which I'll add, everything that happens has to be set up so that even when you reveal some big surprise at the end, the audience can go, aha, and realize they saw the setup, but they didn't put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, that was my problem with Ocean's 12, is that you couldn't actually do that in that movie because the setup is like a meeting that you never saw take place.
And a couple of scenes that you never saw take place.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I'm just going to chime in with I think Ocean's 12 is an underrated masterpiece and the best Ocean's movie. The more I think about it, but I'm not going to go into why I think that. Even though it doesn't follow most of the rules you just laid out, honestly.
Well, yeah, I mean those are sort of general rules, but one of the things that I saw Ocean's 8, and although that's a very entertaining film, it actually just does a bunch of bad things. Like at the end, there's this reveal of this thing that happened, which all the Ocean's movies do, but they don't set this up at all. It's just like, ooh, here's the magic cameo, and it just you don't see any traces of this being set up. There's only like one thing. It's just bad script writing. bad.
Well, I mean, my least favorite part of Ocean's 8 was, and this isn't a spoiler because it happens in the first 5 minutes, is they just insinuate / straight out state that Danny Ocean is dead. And from that point on, I was like, well, I'm out.
Yeah, and if they had done anything even at the end to imply that this is a fake, like when she goes back at the end. Anyway, spoiler alert. Anyway,
well, I mean, the whole movie they do the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, where she's like, "Are you really dead, Danny?" But then she's like, "Yeah, you're really dead." And it's like, okay. Anyway, that's kind of beside the point. But
well, yeah. So I want to jump in one last thing about Series D, and I know you guys I think discussed these in the past, but I wanted to chime in on the titles for Series D.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're technically very nicely done. I also think they are a pointless exercise because they don't communicate a damn thing about the show except that it's in space and called Blake 7. Yep. What does a heads-up display have to do with anything? Well, I guess it does serve one purpose. It eats up 60 seconds of airtime so they don't have to fill with story.
Well, the title sequence is... It's underwhelming.
Yeah, I never actually thought about this, but it is actually decidedly more low effort than the original one. Well,
yeah, it's very technically well done, but it just doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's okay. I'm watching us tilt around space. Okay.
Well, I was reading an analysis of Series D this morning by a blog called Watching Blake 7.
Oh, I've seen that blog. Yeah,
and they did this analysis of Series D, and I think they had some really insightful comments actually in that analysis. They talk about how this title sequence for Series D feels like the brief was just, we're a space show, come up with something. He talks a lot about how Series D feels very last minute, both in its scripting and in its execution, and that carries through right into the title sequence, which feels very slapdash, oh shoot, we're airing an episode next week, what are we going to do type thing.
Yeah, it does feel kind of rudderless, and that's sort of my general opinion of Series D. It's like maybe towards the end they start figuring out what the show is, but by then it's almost too late because it's going to be over in 4 episodes. Well,
part of that is that as we found out from someone commenting on our website, the initial brief for this season being, or an initial plan being that they're looking for all these experts, and then they drop any explicit mention of this, but they still keep looking for the experts, so it ends up being this disjointed where's Waldo for the week.
Well, that's a little bit like what happened on the rebooted Battlestar Galactica, where they had this whole subplot they'd come up with the one of the colonies, and they end up touching on it in 1 or 2 episodes. They ended up dumping it. They ended up re-editing the episodes to get rid of it all because it didn't work.
Great.
So I'll ask Ron more about that next time I run into him at a ball game. I bump into the Giants games here in San Francisco periodically.
Gotcha.
And I'm not giving anything away. He actually puts on his Twitter feed when he's going to be at the ball game, and you can go have a beer with him. So,
well, we don't run into anybody famous down here. We don't bump shoulders with anybody.
Well, see, I don't even know where you guys are. You're probably on the planet Zerok, as far as I know.
We might be. in the middle of the desert. We were, this morning, this is just an aside, look into the production mind of Zenith. We were having some audio problems, and Keanu was like, we could just drive up there and record the episode up there. And I was like, that would be dedication.
Well, buy you guys a couple of brewskis or some Soma at least anyway.
Thanks.
Yeah, Keanu was like, just message Maurice, we'll be there in 8 hours.
Aha, now you're zeroing it in. So I guess the planet Zerok is in the Pacific time zone.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should finally get into how this episode actually starts, because it starts with kind of a cold open almost, actually, with the Scorpio crew, getting guns ready, and it's not really clear where they're going or why, and they're just like, we got to get these guns ready, and Dana's like, I better bring an extra clip.
Yeah. And although I like kind of joining things in media res, the fact that the set is so echoey and their boots are stomping around going clomp, clomp, clomp on everything, you can hardly hear half the dialogue because their footsteps are stepping all over it.
Well, not only that, we get to see the amazing corner of the BBC studio where they shoved the gun rack, which is just like a nondescript white corrugated steel wall. That's like, it's still unclear as to how it actually fits into the Scorpio flight deck, since we never see it on screen when they're on the flight deck.
It's like it's kind of behind, everything. Just trust me on this. That's where it is.
What I find amusing in this scene is it sets up the whole non-involvement of Villa in the entire episode when Taryn tells him to stay awake. Well, apparently he fell asleep in the show because they don't give him a damn thing to do in this. And
Michael Keating seems really pissed about this too.
Yeah, and Villa is the thief, and it's a heist episode. How do you not use Villa in the big heist episode?
Terrence should be the one still on the ship, especially since Terrence the pilot, and all they're having Villa do is the piloting stuff.
Well, the thing about this is at the end you find out it was all just a ruse or whatever, multiple layers of ruses, I guess. So I wonder, was Villa clued into all of this from the beginning? I don't know how he could have been, but maybe there was just some instinct in him.
Well, Avon mentions a couple times throughout this episode that Villa doesn't trust Keller and Aquila, and Villa's frequently right in his assessments.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're docking with this big spaceship that has a big red star painted on the side. My first thought was, this looks like it was made by the Soviets.
I know. I thought that was a very odd choice to put a red star on there as opposed to a blue one or any other color.
Or any other shape or anything. But this specific shape-color combination is this is Soviet.
That said, I do like the uniforms of the Space Princess and what Keeler's wearing. They're so wonderfully tacky, like you'd have on a cruise ship, And I just thought that was a lovely little production touch.
Yeah, I enjoyed all of it. I especially liked the Zerok logo. That was
the
nice.
Zerok logo that was the letters, what was it, ZVK, I think, or ZBK?
ZVP. Yeah.
There you can buy a shirt with that logo on it. Found it online.
What?
Yeah, that was my reaction too.
Yeah, I really liked that they went to the trouble of putting up all those ZVP logos and planting them all over the location. 'Cause it was just a nice little touch they didn't have to do. Except later in the ship's hold, where one is laid rather unconvincingly on the uneven surface of the gold crate, where it's stuck down with tape or something, and it's really obviously not attached.
Well, I like their obvious, we only have 5 extras in this episode, so we're going to cover their faces when they're guards' uniforms, their visors that are full face visors that just completely obstruct their vision.
And then when they're on the Space Princess, there's the wonderful, endlessly circular same half dozen extras wandering around.
I mean, I'm almost convinced those are the same extras who play the president's guards at the end, who also play the ZVP guards.
I wouldn't doubt any of that.
Which is why they had to cover their faces.
All right, so we want to go back. We're jumping way into the details. We want to get back to the beginning of the story and how this all proceeds.
Well, Avon finally plot dumps some key information to us, where this guy Keeler, who is, quote, an old friend, unquote, of Avon.
But like all of Avon's old friends, he's a backstabber, a traitor. They have a complicated working
Well, I mean,
relationship.
if everybody's trying to backstab you, maybe you need to look at the least common denominator here. Avon.
You just need to backstab them yourself.
Preemptive backstabbing. I mean, Avon kind of makes a reference to that when they get onto the spaceship and Kilo's like, oh, are these your friends? He's like, no, we're together for mutual convenience. I'm sure if I betrayed them, they'd not hesitate to just kill me, as they'll not hesitate to kill you if you let us down, Kilo.
Yeah, funny how they didn't kill him at the end.
Yeah.
Anyway, spoiler alert. Let's continue.
Well, this is an interesting scene that I want to dwell on for a moment because Avon kind of seems to explicitly state here that he doesn't really care about anyone on the Scorpio except for himself. And he seems to believe that everybody else has the same belief, which seems contradictory to some of the things we've seen earlier this season.
It seems contradictory to most of Series C.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Avon, of course, I suppose that could be, him just trying to convince Keeler of something. Look how bad these people are and how bad we all are.
Right. There is that moment later also where Tarrant and Sulin, that I'm mentioning, is it's sort of connected to this, where they get mad at Keeler for killing for killing the doctor.
Yeah, the doctor, who was unarmed and not a threat. And that seems odd given their brief anger, but then acceptance of Avon just airlocking the doctor in Star Drive.
Well, I mean, honestly, this is really relates to something I have a note on, which is one thing that does bother me in stories like this is how many people they kill. Oh, sure. Later on, we find out some of the guards work for the Federation, but there's a line between killing enemy troopers in a revolution and quite another thing when they're offing guards employed by some, what is ostensibly a business. I know they try to draw a distinction when Keeler guns down the doctor that you mentioned, but that dodge aside, they're killing people in the course of committing a robbery, not a revolutionary action. They're just being thieves, murderous thieves. And that's the one thing about these episodes I don't care for.
They are a little trigger happy in this episode. And I noticed that too, because Sulin is just running around like it's a kid in a candy store. Pew, 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 pew. Got you.
Kid with a gun in a candy store.
Sulin's racking up the high score here and yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
That's a criticism I've seen a lot for this episode, just online, is like, or really some of these Series D episodes actually, is that people are like, they kind of kill people willy-nilly and they don't have as much of a cause anymore and stuff like that. So
rebels without a cause.
Again, that's where like I said, it feels a little rudderless because it's like, I mean, I realize that most of them are criminals and stuff, but it just feels like it's like, okay, we're on the mission now, and if people die, they die, as long as they're holding a gun.
Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, if he dies, he dies.
There you go. There's a first Blake 7 comparison to Rocky IV. Well, it is Series D. That would be Rocky series episode D, right? Yeah, I see the connection.
Be approximately around the time of Rocky 3, 4, I think.
I think that belongs on the D list. Anyway, let's move on.
Wow.
So Avon plot dumps what they're about to do, what they're planning on doing.
Yeah, Kilo's come up with this quote ingenious unquote plan.
And as of right now, it's not all that complicated. It gets more complicated later on. There were points in this episode where I had to go like, all right, wait, what? Like, what's going on here? Maybe that's just me.
Well, part of it is they also don't spell out everything. So like later in the episode, there are a couple of things that happen that we just sort of get dropped in on. We don't hear the planning for it, Yeah,
well, later, yeah. Avon's like, we're going to go with Kilo's plan as it stands. I'm like, wait. What is Keeler's plan, though? I don't think you told us.
Wasn't it just to sell the gold for $6 billion?
Yeah, but apparently Keeler had this whole plan in how to steal it and to fake an illness to get the ship.
Yeah, they
didn't spell any of that out. I'm like, what is Keeler's plan, Avon?
Well, I mean, the illness thing, I guess, is one of those things that goes wrong on the caper where they have a change in the doctor. So now he has to fake this illness instead of her pretending she's ill. But it does sort of come in rather clumsily in terms of the way the script is constructed. They don't say earlier, okay, she's going to fake this thing. So it's that tricky line of surprising the audience as things are revealed and maybe giving too little detail. You sort of have to find that line between those two things.
Yeah, there's definitely that line between giving too little detail and giving too much that they really needed to straddle better, I think.
Yeah.
But what they're doing now is, Keeler, I think, reveals that planet Zerok, which is, I think, one of the biggest gold producers in the galaxy.
Avon calls it the gold planet.
Yeah, they say actually that it's the last place that still has gold. Every place else is mined out.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and then Keeler mentions that gold is still used in backwater transactions that don't have computer systems. And I was like, wow. That's...
But it's obviously still really expensive, and Keeler wants to make a profit.
Well, I mean, this line mentioning that it's mined out everywhere is preemptively undermining the criticism that gold only holds value because it's scarce. So in a galaxy or in a science fiction or space hopping adventure where you have all these other planets, gold must kind of necessarily be much less scarce than it is now, which in turn would lower the value of gold. So you have Keeler coming in like, it's mined out everywhere, it's only on Zerok, which is artificial scarcity being introduced just to make gold still valuable in this universe.
Speaking of Zerok, the one thing I noticed is that when we see Xerox from space, it's a sparkly gold planet. Did you notice that?
It's a literal gold planet.
It's literally sparkly gold.
Then they land on it and it looks like they used a water treatment facility to film in.
Well, at least that adds some production value because it is supposed to be like a fake thing, like a vegetable processing plant, In fact, I'm curious what the location actually was where they filmed that. I'm sure a certain Twitter feed could probably tell us that. I wonder
when he gets to Series D in 3 years.
Well, okay, I'll get my TARDIS and I'll jump ahead and come back and tell you guys.
Or when he releases that physical book, did you guys hear about that? There's going to be a physical copy.
Oh, is that actually going through? Because remember when we talked about it with him on Rescue, he was like, "There's a lot of legal rights limbo stuff that's going to be worked out."
This was after that. I mean, he posted coming soon type thing.
Yeah, I would love a book like that, especially if you could license it, because I have a couple of friends who did. I don't know if you guys saw that book that came out a few months ago called Star Trek Lost Scenes.
I heard about it. I didn't see it personally.
It's an amazing book. These two guys I know have restored like thousands of film clips, and they made a book where they have all these photos of behind the scenes stuff on the sets, much like the Making Blake 7 Twitter feed does. But they've got them in an officially licensed book with all this text and script excerpts and everything, and it's just an amazing book. And a Blake 7 book like that, I would kill Servalan for.
Yikes.
I would kill Servalan anyway, but...
Yeah, well, if you're Avon, you must kill her yourself.
You did not do it when you have the perfect opportunity.
We'll talk about that.
Paul Darrow has some solid gold lines in this.
Wow.
Solid gold dancers, once again.
I loved Paul Darrow in this. He's playing unhinged Avon. You can just tell he's having such a great time with it. I mean, in the context of the show, I don't know how I feel about unhinged Avon, but watching Paul Darrow play unhinged Avon is one of the greatest things I've ever seen on TV.
And this is an instance of him doing it well without stepping on other people's time or lines or whatever,
Well, I also love him. You can see him just loving that line. What's the snag?
I mean, that, and then later on he's like, but which president? And there's so many Avon lines in this that are just like, I just love it. And the final shot of this episode, too, is by far my favorite scene of Paul Darrow acting in this show.
Oh, yeah. I also think that it's, you sort of see I think he's enjoying the format change here. They're doing something different, and you can sort of see him just really, I'd be interested if he ever commented on this episode, because it looks like he's having a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he looks like he's loving it. And there are moments in this where he goes full Clint Eastwood, holding his gun like a pistol, which I want to talk about later when we get to it.
Related to that, I also think this is the episode where Avon smiles more than any other episode. Almost it's like a snake, those little fake smiles he aims at Keeler. But I was like, oh yeah, he looks really unhinged here.
I mean, he's just loving it. Keeler keeps calling Avon old friend, and Avon's like, we're not friends, Keeler.
Well, it would have been almost more interesting if he just never replied, and it's just like from one side, it's like that just says it right there. No, we're not.
Well, so Keeler explains this plan where the
Zerok processes the gold. They turn it into black gold.
Yeah.
Oil? No, I'm kidding.
I mean, that was I couldn't figure out where I heard the term black gold before for the whole thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's oil.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said black gold, Texas tea.
Right.
Texas tea. Good old Texas tea, my boys. But basically, he wants to get to the gold before it's processed, hack into the system, which is a full Avon, that's Avon's specialty. Hack into the system, modify it so that the gold doesn't get turned black, steal the gold, and then turn the system back, and then everybody will just assume the gold got turned black. And then once it's on the ship, it's basically theirs because there's only one guard who guards it because it's literally useless in its black form, so they don't send anybody with it. Plus, it's disguised as vegetables, so...
Great.
Yeah, the vegetables pass their ship date, apparently, since they're black.
Yeah.
I actually like this whole setup. Again, it's the intricate kind of plot, and you have all these things that can go wrong, but all these things, it sounds logical. We do A, B, C, D, but then any one little thing that goes wrong, then you have to improvise to salvage it.
Right.
I agree. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this setup. And of course, things go wrong immediately.
Well, they get to Zerok.
Just think Xerox, but with rocks.
I keep thinking there's a V in the middle because there's a V in the middle of the logo.
It's the Xeron Very Planet. I don't know.
I don't think that's a V. I think it's just like a shape. I think it's just ZP.
It might be Xerox something P. I don't know what it is.
Dull Pineapple Company up in here.
They could have called it Elon, and that would have been dull backwards. That would have been social commentary.
Yeah, that would have been social commentary, and probably would have angered quite a few people.
So they don't tell Keeler about their teleport system
yet, but yeah,
this was funny.
I really thought that also the casting on Keeler was really, really good. I mean, when you have a guest star who's really just a good actor, and playing this kind of role, it really elevates the material.
Oh yeah, the guy who's playing Keeler nails it.
I looked this guy up. I mean, I knew his name last night.
Don't
I don't
worry,
remember it anymore.
I'll pull it up for you right now. Roy Kinnear.
Kinnear, yeah. Yeah, he's great, and he's just his physicality is really good. He plays a lot of really good emotions, and he's got this kind of false bravado about him. But when the cracks show, you really see through to this kind of sniveling coward that he really is. And I thought he was just great, and that kind of actor, I really love it when the show gets it. The show often had really good actors, but he just really stands out. And it's partly the part, but also just he really sells that performance.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I agree too. He's definitely, you can buy him as a coward, but the way he's playing it, you can tell there's wheels turning in his head there when he's sitting there thinking.
Yeah, especially because they actually, the director, I'll give him credit for, because sometimes he holds on Keeler's expression when other characters are talking, and you can see the wheels turning. There's even a place where near the end where he's where Avon's off camera talking, and you just look at, and they just fix on Keeler's face for a good long shot, and you see sort of the desperation. You can just see it turning in his head, and it's great.
Well, yeah, so this plan immediately goes wrong because Avon and the pals teleport down without telling Keeler, and he's like, how did you get in? I was going to let you into the fence. And they're like, don't worry about it. Let's just go. And they go, and basically everything's going well right until they get to the gold room where somebody triggers the alarm. And Avon and Sulin are like, well, we're doomed. There's a bomb that's going to go off of some sort. That's what it seems to be.
This whole sequence is kind of interesting because I like the idea of what they're trying to do, but it's I want to sort of jump back a step to when they first come down to the planet, because the start of that sequence where they start with the shot of the chopper taking off is really pretty good, and I like it when they manage to put spaceships in a shot with live action and make it actually work, because they rarely did it, so it immediately adds this sense of scope and everything. But right after that, when Keeler ducks the guards, the shots are a mess. They cut from one angle on Keeler to another shot, barely different. It's a classic jump cut, and then Avon and pretty one Sulin teleport down. There's this really blatant dissolve where Keeler's head moves. They should have been able to do that in a single shot, and if they'd staged it right and had Mr. Kinnear managed to freeze for the teleport. But it's just awkward. And one thing I do love it when you mentioned that thing about they come down is that Sulin's snarky shortcut explanation. The how'd you get here? Shortcut. And I love it when they don't explain things needlessly. One thing I hated on the show early on was they were so glib about using the teleport and telling others about it. Blake's like, it's a teleport. We have a teleport. And it's they ought to have tried to keep that a secret for as long as possible, because so long as your enemies don't know about it, they wouldn't expect it. Right. The moment you know your enemy has a way to pop in almost anywhere, you're going to put guards where you'd never put them otherwise. The reveal of the teleport to the Federation on Servalan should have been a huge setback. And it's just one of these, teleport. So I love the fact that they just sort of ducked it.
Yeah. I mean, Blake was never, the brightest bulb in the box. But yeah, no, totally.
Blake was a little too giving of information.
I mean, loose lips sink ships, and Blake apparently never heard that statement because he was just running around like, we would teleport. Maybe because Blake was trying to build up this mythical image of himself. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that was it. I was just saying the teleport. Let me tell you about our teleport. It's wonderful.
Sitting in a bar drinking, huh? Let me tell you about this teleport we have.
Yeah. So, now they're down there and, when they go in, we talked about the guards and killing the guards and all that thing. But, the first thing they do is Keeler has that line, when he goes up to the first guard they see, he goes, "They're with me." Well, just moments earlier, he told Avon, "They think I went on that chopper. I'm no safer here than you." Well, if that's the case, he should expect the guards might just gun them down. And given that, why does the guard just stand there, then try to shoot them in the back? It's just super clumsy and awkward and nonsensical.
Yeah, I was wondering that too, actually.
I got the impression at this moment, I mean, maybe looking back on this later doesn't quite add up, but, in this moment I was like, all right, so Keeler's not telling them something. Which he's not, but I don't see how it all plays into.
Oh yeah, I think you might be right about that, because then he does have the security access code and stuff, which doesn't make any sense if he's just a purser on the ship. Why would he have an access code that would work on this facility?
Well, you find out that he's setting them up, so
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a subtle clue there. So I'll forgive it that. But then I want to add on, after that, we're talking about this action. So then they go along, and then that action's awkwardly shot, and then it gets worse because Avon shoots the second guard. And then there's that bit with when Sulin, guns down the other two guards, and it's so awkwardly edited. It's not even clear what happens. I had to watch it several times to realize what's going on, because they have a guard pop up here, and then she sort of shoots sideways, and we see this guy get hit, and then she turns. It just is. I had to rewind it 3 times to figure out what the hell was going on, because it's just so poorly executed.
Yeah.
You're talking about the moment when the guards jump up, and then it looks like Avon and Sulin shoot the guards, but then Avon turns to Keeler, and he's like, Sulin got both of them, right?
Yeah, it was just, before that, that whole bit where she shoots both of them, it's just so poorly edited, and the angles and stuff. It looks like the same guard from 2 different angles, actually 2 different guards. It's just a mess. So I don't think this director was particularly good at action stuff as I watched this episode. It didn't seem to be his strong suit.
No, maybe you're right about that.
Yeah. Seems like he's winging it about as much as we wing these podcasts.
I like that moment in the airlock.
Hey, I'm prepared. I have coffee.
I don't. I don't even have breakfast before these podcasts.
Well, I understand low blood sugar helps the intellect.
Does it?
Well, at least that's what, never mind.
Well,
so anyway, yes, there's all this awkward action, and that's fine. And then they they go down there and they go down to the processing plant and they have this whole business about having to go in and have the radiation, and Keeler makes some comment about changing a red leaf to a white leaf or something. I didn't quite understand what that dialogue meant.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
I think they were just going to deactivate the
bomb security system.
Yeah, if I just seen him
was.
holding a tool or a card or anything, so I knew what he was going to do. But there's just sort of weird, nonsensical line. You don't even say a red wire to a white wire. It's just I couldn't even understand it. But it doesn't matter. It's a small particular there.
Mm-hmm. And they move on from this pretty quickly, actually. When they set this whole thing up, I was like, all right, the entire episode is going to be this operation. And
right.
I mean, it is, but like things go so wrong here that they have to do something else. So I was like, okay, I'm sort of more interested now. Because Terrence and Dana actually teleport down as well when things start going wrong.
Yeah, well, they're running to save Avon and Su Lin, and I'm so used to Terrence and Su Lin being together. Avon and Su Lin. And I was unclear about what exactly happens here, if it was like an explosion or a radiation leak.
It was yeah.
Well, what happens is when they describe it later on, they say there were two guards that jumped them. And, there's what was I going to say about that? There's two guards, and then of course so I remember what I was going to say. Can I just say it's super obvious what happened here when they think that Avon and Su Lin are dead, because Keeler says there were two guards, and Terrence says, "We found you in the corridor, Keeler. There were no guards." But he and Dana saw remains, and she said something like, 2 bodies, I think. The radiation hasn't left much.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. The answer is plain as the eyeshadow on Dana's face. Even as they discuss it, one of them ought to have gone just a tick. It makes our heroes look really kind of thick. Okay.
Well, Terrence is pretty thick, and Terrence Terrence kind of sees an opportunity here to take charge now that Avon's out of the picture.
Yeah, he jumps on this real quick.
Oh, yeah, and since when does radiation dissolve bodies?
I mean, really powerful radiation can, but it'd have to be like, Keeler would be vaporized as well. Like, there'd be no way that Keeler wouldn't be, and the bodies would be, if the radiation was that powerful.
But I mean, it was that powerful, we should have watched Terrence Perm wilting as they're discussing.
Yeah, that too. The bodies themselves would still be radioactive if it truly was radiation, and Dana and Terrence would have been at high risk for cancer or radiation poisoning themselves.
Maybe they have cancer now. You never. What if they die in the last episode from cancer?
At least it's not cancer with her little mechanical crab spider thing.
But let me just try and defend this decision for a minute. Wasn't this just Terrence? This is the impression I got, that this was Terrence and Dana just trying to give Keeler like a scare. Like, we know what happened, Keeler, and you did this, and lying through their teeth about it.
My impression was that Terrence and Dana fully believed this. That line, specifically from Dana about the radiation not leaving a lot of their body, is what made me believe it, because Keeler wasn't in that scene at all. Keeler was knocked out when she said that, and she said that to Terrence. It was just those two, and there was no reason for her to say that if they were trying to, bluff Keeler into anything.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe she found out what was going on between those two scenes, and they started,
I mean, especially
Keeler.
Since when Avon contacted Scorpio, Villa's like, "We thought you were dead," and Avon's like, "Teleport us," Villa, and he's like, "But you're dead," and Avon's like, "Villa, teleport."
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's an indication that, they don't know what's going on, but I don't know.
Yeah, kind of going back to a step there on that. There is also something here that I really bugged me. When we first find out that, oh, surprise, surprise, that Avon and Su Lin are still alive. They're commenting on that, and Avon says about those two guards, their uniforms were perfect, but the guns were not standard issue. Didn't you notice? So I was thinking to myself, well, I didn't notice that they looked different, and none of the other guards fired their weapons in close up, so there wasn't even a different sound to hint at this. So when I watched it again, I saw their guns were different looking, but the photography and the editing and the sound doesn't give you any chance to notice this, and it really should have. And this is the thing I said about setting things up where the audience goes, oh, yeah, I didn't, that gun was weird looking. And then you think, oh, the other guys had those trooper type rifles, and then on top of that, what really cheesed me was that Avon noticed it instead of Su Lin the gunslinger.
Yeah.
And I hate it when writers give a popular character too many abilities and too much insight at the expense of the others. I mean, it happened a lot with Spock on Star Trek, so much so that he'd sometimes just conclude things without even looking at his instruments. He was stronger than humans in thin air and heat and in a blizzard. He becomes like a Swiss Army knife of abilities, and it gets boring. And the same thing with Avon. They just sometimes give him too much insight in things that should be way outside of his bailiwick, and there are other characters there who should be the ones saying this stuff.
Avon is the golden child of Blake 7, though, if you really think about it. Paul Dara, I mean.
Let's talk to Chris Boucher about that.
That's actually something I'll touch on it now because you bring it up, and that's something I wanted to touch on like at the very end of this podcast. Is that's probably one of my biggest criticisms of this show, is that there's so many opportunities for other characters to have their moment to shine, yet Avon is front and center most of the time.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to add just on the end of this is that, and I forget exactly where he says this, but there's that point when Avon's saying that Keeler, someone is using Keeler to get to them. He says it's the only logical explanation. And I thought, how mysterious. Who could possibly be after them? Perhaps, and this is a wild stab, someone with an affinity for high heels, eyeshadow, and treachery.
I mean, that was the thing that there's supposed to be a big reveal who it is. But the instant that she stepped onto the planet at the end of the episode and there's a shot heels? Just of her high heels, I was like, I know who that is. I know exactly who that is.
Well, there's that also, there's the scene where like Avon leans over the panel or whatever and he's like, Keeler was employed by the former president.
But then he goes, but which president?
Like, I wonder, maybe the only one who's important.
Well, there was that other president when Servalan was just Supreme Commander and not president, back in series A and B. Really? Throw back to a simpler time.
Well, I think you guys have said this before, and I kind of agree with this, and this is a problem with shows with recurring villains. I mean, it's really obvious Servalan's behind this from the moment, that they say, who could it be, because who else would it be?
Travis.
Travis. There, that would have been a twist. At least the script makes clear that she planned the whole thing when Avon says it wasn't hard to work out, but it wasn't meant to be, was it? Which is hanging a lantern on it, admittedly, but at least they don't insult us by making it seem like it should be this complete surprise, Mm-hmm. But again, in this rebooted series CD universe minus Blake, where Servalan is the yin to Avon's yang, there's this ridiculous quote, he doesn't know you as well as I do, close quote, who does dialogue. I mean, ugh. And hey, after Sand, I think Taryn might know her more intimately than even Avon.
There is that. I forget what he actually says, but there's a line from Avon once they get back onto the Scorpio. And it's something about Servalan, and then there's this shot for like 3 seconds of Taryn's face, and he just kind of like looks away.
Yeah, no, there was this sort of, yes, I know what you did.
Right.
And so I have a problem with it being Servalan behind this. She's shoehorned in the story for no real gain, except they have this lame banter at the end, and she feels so unnecessary, and for God's sake, just shoot her. Even if Avon won't, Dana ought to put a bullet between her eyes without a second thought.
Yeah, I mean, we jumped way ahead, but that was my biggest problem with that scene was that Dana's just standing there. Dana, who 3 weeks ago, basically threw a temper tantrum on Scorpio because they beamed her up before she could shoot. Servalan is just standing there watching Avon talk to Servalan, and then they leave.
Yeah, I have one last comment about Servalan that I'm going to save until you guys have seen the last episode, because I don't want to spoil anything. And even if I say this one little thing, I'm not going to ruin it for you.
3 weeks.
So we'll hold on to that one. All right, so now we found out they're still alive, and this is when this is, I think, at the point right where they decide they're going to go ahead with the plan.
Yeah, they're going to go ahead with Keeler's plan as it stands, and then Villa says, or as it falls.
No, yeah, might I say that I thought it was funny that finally, when they get back to the ship and they're talking about how their dead friends are, what happened, and then finally Villa gets a few lines. It's like, yeah, I'm okay. I think I count Villa's lines in this episode on 2 hands. He does have a great zinger. He has the best line in the show when Keeler says, "I've got a criminal record." Hasn't everybody?
I was going to mention that because that was a solid line. That was a solid line from Villa.
There's some great lines in that, and at least they gave him that to make up for the nothing that he gets to do in the rest of the episode.
The thing is about like this though is whenever Villa is the one to sort of maybe get shafted for the episode, I'm more okay with it because he's had his moments, he's had his episodes,
but
he's been in the show the entire
episode
time.
That would be a Villa episode. It's the one where they're doing a heist.
Yeah, I guess, but at the same time, I also liked the idea that Villa was like clued into everything that was going on. He's like, I'm not getting involved in this crazy nonsense.
Yeah, well, okay, that's fine, and I agree with you. That's fine if because he has this experience, but they don't even let him say that. It's earlier in the episode when they say, "Oh, Villa doesn't trust you this." Well, why can't Villa say that?
Sure, yeah.
So I want to take a quick aside because we're getting to the point where they go back onto the Space Princess and everything. And the thing that I wanted to say about the production design on this episode, and it's kind of ambitious. There's a lot of sets in this episode compared to some of the other ones. They have the location on the planet, they have the other planet at the end, they have the Space Princess. It's good, but it doesn't quite come off. I think some of the Space Princess sets are pretty nice, especially the corridor and the storage compartment. But at the same time, this is the most kitchen aisle episode of Blake 7, where so much of the set dressing is super obvious plastic trays and drawer organizers and disposable aluminum baking trays. In the very first shot of Keeler, there's a column of them stuck on the wall, and they look like exactly what they are. And they're not even straight; they're crooked. And there's like art to greebling a set with found objects. The trick is you have to do something simple that disguises what they are, and put them in places where it feels like they serve some purpose. But here, it looks like somebody just stapled gun columns into the walls, and it almost works on some of the sets like the cargo hold, but there's no attempt to hide the seams and the edges or do anything that would break it up, just enough so your eye doesn't go right to it and go lasagna tray.
Well, I mean, it's the BBC having a budget of no more than like £5 a piece of lint and a paperclip.
Well, yeah, and that's it. But I've seen things like this done on other shows, and it's just like you fiddle with the edges. You put a piece of pipe over the seam. You do anything just to break the obvious thing that your eye goes to and says that's what that is. Where like the location for the Zerok mine setting is way better, even though it's the occasional obvious bin stuck to the odd wall, but it's not as haphazard looking.
I mean, but I can almost imagine like the set designer like going into the BBC cafeteria and like looking around shadily to make sure no one's looking, and he just grabs all the lunch trays and runs away.
Oh, well, no, that's so typical. I mean, on the original Star Trek show, a lot of the things you see on the walls of the ship are styrofoam packing things they found in dumpsters they painted red and glued to the wall, because it was an interesting shape.
I mean, the great thing about styrofoam is you can cut it into any shape you want.
Yeah. So like even if they just done something like where they had like put a little, a sticker dot on each of these things in a certain place, just anything that just breaks it, your eye goes to that little thing instead of the thing that it is. Anyway, I understand low budget filmmaking. I worked on some, but it just I'm constantly distracted by, look, a drawer organizer.
Yeah, but no, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So, okay. I want to also really quickly jump back to when they talk about loading up the Space Princess, when Avon and Sulin are going to get back up there onto, from the planet. There's this whole business of the Space Princess loading on Zerok. I mean, did it land? It sure doesn't look like it can land. And if it did, why is there the chopper that Keeler was supposed to be on? That made no sense to me at all. I couldn't follow what was supposed to be going on there.
I was under the impression that it orbits the planet and then the ship comes up, loads it, and then it flies to the next planet, and then the ship comes up, picks up the stuff, and goes down.
Yeah, I just didn't understand why Keeler would go down on one shuttle, go back up, and it just seemed needless complication. That didn't add anything to the story.
Well, again, Keeler's definitely setting them up, so.
Oh, yeah.
How much of that is standard procedure and how much of it is just show?
He might be getting his stories mixed at this point and, trying to cover for himself and creating this entire web of lies, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm...
Yeah, okay. I'll accept that. Objection sustained.
Sustained. Well, so they go back to the Space Princess, and we
enact this plan.
We pick up bits and pieces of this plan where, like, Dana was originally going to fake being ill, but the previous doctor, who was like a drunken fool, got replaced by a new doctor, so they've actually got to make her ill.
Yeah.
Which they mention that right when they get back to the Space Princess, but you don't really see the payoff or why they're doing that until much later.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed watching this is, when they first come on the ship with all the stoned passengers, which they don't start off super stoned. I noticed that too. At first, when I rewatched it, they seem a little more sharper, and then they're kind of, oh, hi, no, I don't know where the office is the next time we see them. They've been eating the food.
Yeah.
That was a nice little grace note there. But, once the cruise starts, and Avon goes into Keeler's office, I noticed that, the locker he opened. He opens that locker. When he had opened the locker earlier with Sulin and said guns, and she says useful. And then he comes in and the locker is still open, and it stays open when Sulin and Tarrant come in. And then later when the Space Princess officer comes in and Tarrant and Sulin are hiding, it's closed. Yeah, okay, that's a continuity nitpick, and maybe the result of an edit. But the whole business with the locker and the guns is a pointless loose end. The principle of Chekhov's gun should apply here. If you're going to introduce a gun, then someone has to use it. Why do we mention guns and leave a locker open and then never go back to it?
I mean, I think it might explain where Keeler got his gun from, right? Because his gun looks pretty different from the Scorpio guns, and he hadn't had a gun until this point. So I guess the question would remain, like, where did Keeler get the gun? Well, it's like, okay, well, there was gun locker on the sort of flight deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but just again, I think some of this is just the clumsiness of the way it's directed, and possibly there are some minor bits that got edited out, and that you might have seen Keeler take the thing, but it's just one of those things that just jumped out at me because I'm always super aware, like when they make a point of saying something that's like a prop that they're going to use, and then they don't use it. You're like, all right,
and the idea that this might be where Keeler got the gun. This might go back to your point earlier, Maurice, of like, how do you walk that fine line between giving the audience too much, maybe making them feel stupid or something like that, or like giving them too little.
Yeah, it's that whole thing. There's a principle in drama where you want the audience to almost figure it out and the characters get to their like a beat before they do,
Right.
And that's when you feel satisfied. You go, oh yes, that makes sense. But you didn't quite come to the conclusion. And this episode kind of hurts because there's too many cases where that doesn't go through. So yeah, so they're doing the thing, and they've got the intricate plot, and then they have to go into the hold and do the whole bit about getting at the black gold.
This was the most exciting part of the episode to me, when they're in this the hold, and they're on camera, and they manipulate the security cameras and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought that was really pretty tense, but it could have even been tenser, and this is a place where the staging, I thought, hurt the production in a small way, with that whole business that starts when they come in with the gurney, because the first time we see it is in the lift with that computer cube thing sitting on it. Mm-hmm. But the way the framing is, it looks like a shelf in the elevator. I only put together what it was on the rewatch. The way it should have been staged is we should have seen them push the gurney in or out of the cube, out of the lift with the cube on it, so that we don't wonder, like, why is that cube sitting there conveniently in the foreground, And then Avon wheels it in later after Keeler walks in with the cube, and I'm going, what? I had to go rewind it to figure out what the heck actually happened there.
I mean, I'm kind of curious what the actual purpose of those cubes are, because if you notice on the flight deck, there's like dozens of them next to the monitor, like where Tarrant and Sulin are watching on the monitor.
Guess is they were
just like
secure. They were like video recorders, because they use it to play back video. So they're probably all the security camera
possibly they record.
Things.
Possibly they record all the security footage on those cubes.
Because VHS tape is much too big. So
yeah, well,
spinning back
cubes.
Yeah. So when they get into that whole thing with them busting into there, and and getting into the bin with the gold is really pretty good. Yeah, there's some of the actions a little clumsy, like Well, like one thing I noticed is what the editor screwed up is when Avon and Keeler fire to blow the latches off, they do a crossfire because Avon shoots and it hits the latch on the opposite side. Then sorry, they're crisscrossing their shots. It's like oops. It's really
Crossing
minor,
beams.
but and once they lift the lid, it's really obvious. It's just soft plastic. It's not like anything tough, I guess it's the future where Rubbermaid is as tough as Herculaneum. That said, I do like when they lift it up, the way there's that lift inside the box that lifts the gold up into the shot, and then they tilt the camera down at the same time. That was a nice little bit of business.
You see just charcoal, just
Yeah.
black rock.
Yeah, he got really excited about it too. Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah, but then Keeler leans in and then he gets jumped by they look like termites, land on his jacket. He freaks out.
The killers.
He's like, get them off. And Avon's like going to use his hand. And he's like, no, not using your hand, you fool. And then Avon's like, what the hell are they? And they're like, the killers. They latch onto you and then they tunnel through everything and they don't stop unless you get them off. And I'm like, what?
Well, I clearly I'm not the only one who thinks this is a laughably lame booby trap.
Well, not only that, like,
they go through you in 10 seconds. Well,
It takes 15
he
to
says
get them
some
off.
of them don't ignite right away. Well, apparently all of them don't ignite right away.
I mean, but not only that, like, how do you disarm this booby trap? Like, if you're, say you're Servland on the other end and you get this box of black gold and you open it up and all of a sudden there's freaking little mites on you, like, how do you disarm this booby trap?
You just got to get one of your disposable, guards to do it for you, I guess.
One of your mutoids.
Yeah.
Yeah, or you have the thing like in Alien, they just keep eating through the ship when they land on the floor. But stupid gimmick aside, I love the panic that Roy Kinnear plays there when they're on him and the way he's hyperventilating and it's over. He still doesn't believe. No, check. Make sure they're all off.
Yeah, well, when he's done, then Avon
lit for me.
Well, Avon just kind of like dumpsters him verbally, where he's like, "Are there going to be any other dumb booby traps, Keeler?"
The lame booby traps. I also noticed that when this is another staging thing where they sort of miss an opportunity is when they you have the bit during that where there's that officer or whatever in the purser's office and they're watching the monitor with the tape, and then when Keeler falls back he gets up and they push in on the cube video unit, and it's not entirely obvious what's gone wrong there because the cube wasn't rotating at first when he turned on, though it was later, and you do see him plug a cord into it, but the way the shot is done you don't see like the cord missing. It doesn't register right away, so it's not really immediately obvious that the thing is shut off. Mm-hmm. And so there's this moment where there's the guy in the purser's office. There should be this moment, but he just conveniently is seen exiting as the actual security camera footage is seeing. In a proper heist, there'd be a moment where he almost sees the feed, but something or someone distracts him, like Suland would make a noise or something, and they just missed those opportunities here that they were just, I'm sure it's because they had such, short production schedule and nobody had the time to work out all this business. But the scriptwriter should have had that kind of stuff in there.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one that seemed the most obvious missed opportunity to me because I noticed this too, and I made a note about it that, this guard is leaving when the footage changes over to the real footage, and it's like, they kind of should have shot it in reverse and had the guard coming in when the footage has swapped. And then you have this moment of tension where it's like, is he going to see Avon and Keeler? And then he swaps the footage like right as the guy opens the door. Like, that's how I would have done it.
Yeah. It's always that the thing in a heist is always got to be, are they going to get caught? Are they going to get caught? Are they going to get caught? So you create all these moments where they almost do. And then somehow somebody does something unexpected, like one of the stoned passengers knocks on the door, or something, and that they miss that opportunity.
Yeah. There's a way actually in which like the way this episode goes is there's almost none of that, and they just get found out in like this very, I don't know, not unceremonious, but like
someone
just
like
a dumb
finds
way.
the guard's body.
They just go about the whole thing like poorly, and they're just like, oh shoot, like someone just found us in the elevator.
Yeah, there's a number of things there that are like that, where they don't try to clean up anything that's really obvious, And when Keeler shoots the doctor, they just leave the body there, and I'm like going, well, if that isn't going to set off an alarm, somebody's going to find this dead guy in the hallway. I mean, do you guys just assume? It's like, really, even if they just discuss it, no time, anything, those are the things. It's like, they didn't the guard they killed in the hold, they just leave him there, and they leave the lid off of things. So I mean, you think you would do anything that would buy you an extra 3 seconds of anything. Anyway,
well, so we get the scene where Dana's like deathly ill, and Tarrant is quite possibly the worst actor I've ever seen, because he's like, oh no, she's dying, and the doctor's like, well, I can give her some medication to ease the pain, but on Earth, she's not going to be served because she's an alien. Then I was like, is Dana not human?
I think
alien is in like an illegal alien.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Because I was like, is Dana not human?
But I have to say, I agree with you, but what I thought was hilarious, I think this is Tarrant trying to pretend he's stoned.
I don't know, because I think he just sucks at acting, because then the doctor's like...
I think it's a combination.
Because the doctor's like, well, we can't expect the ship to go back, can we? And Tarrant just smiles and shakes his head in like I hate myself right now.
But there is that moment when the doctor says, what's the line? He says, we have to return to Zerok, and I can't see that happening. Can you? And Terrence behind him, and this grin spreads across his face. And then the doctor turns and he obscures Terrence from the camera, and when we reveal him again, he's gone back to the stone mask. And I love that little moment where you see he's like, aha, we got it, and then I have to put it back, I have to start acting again. And I thought that was a nice touch. I mean, yeah, I actually thought maybe it was a decision of the actor to play it like he's a bad actor.
I mean, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I think
the most egregious line was when he goes, when the doctor's like, we're not going to be able to give her medicine on Earth, and Tarrant goes, but then she'll die. Like, wow.
Well, I think it's like when people pretend, like I had somebody critique something I had written, and they said, a stone person wouldn't talk like that. I said, you haven't been around enough real stone people. You've been watching Jeff Spicoli on Fast Times at Ridgemont High too much.
It's a movie we just watched, Chuck, where he does lines of cocaine and then just like seems completely
copious amounts of cocaine.
Copious amounts of cocaine, and then he's just completely normal right off, and he just walks around like a completely lucid and functioning as a normal human being. It's like,
Okay, so anyway, Dana's...
Dana foobars the whole thing, because as soon as she sees Avon, she's like, Avon, I'm dying! And then the doctor sees this opportunity to run away.
Yeah, so why does Avon pull a gun on the doctor at the beginning? I mean, just let him take Dana to the damned airlock. It's an unnecessary bit of business. All it does is lets Keeler shoot an unarmed man.
Well, I think they need to put the gold onto the gurney is the thing. They're sneaking the gold off the ship on the gurney with Dana on it, but... at the same time, that plan immediately falls apart, and would have fallen apart, anyway, because is there really a reason to put it on the gurney with Dana on it if they're going to just dispose of the doctor or get rid of him or get him out of the way? I mean, they didn't necessarily need to kill him.
They set up the whole thing with the gurney. They take it into the vault, and into the hold. So clearly they're using the same one. So they've already had to have loaded it by this point.
Yeah, see, that was the thing, is that I was wondering, is like, why wouldn't they just let the doctor do this and take the gurney full of gold onto the ship, and no one would be none the wiser, right? But no, instead Avon has to come bursting, and he's like, this is a stick-up.
It's just this awkward bit of business that just doesn't make sense.
But yeah, Keeler shoots the unarmed guard.
I didn't mind it, I just kind of went with it. I do love that line from Keeler, we're going to walk right off this ship and no one's even going to stop us. And then it immediately
the alarm goes off.
Yeah, jinxed it there, pal.
Then they're running towards the airlock, and they're like, we've only got 10 seconds before it automatically disconnects.
Well, okay, I really like that last minute teleport, the as it's disconnecting. That's a good bit of, action. But was Avon shot in the back, and is he fine? Or he just
That's what I thought.
Over his own feet to avoid being hit.
But
y'all had some questions, but I just kind of went with it. I was just like, you know what? I'm just along for this ride.
But right before that, Paul Dara does full Clint Eastwood. He goes, "Go, I'll cover you." He puts the gun up with one arm and he closes one eye, and he's shooting like one-eyed straight down the barrel, just like a 6-shooter. I'm like, I see what you're doing there, Paul.
Lends credence to that theory that Blake Seven in character came up with a few months ago, which is that Avon, holding his gun like a 6-shooter is actually him covering his eyes from the light the gun emits.
Sure. Right.
Hey, fans can justify anything.
I mean, they can justify anything, but can they justify it well?
Yes.
Debatably.
I believe it.
Do you? I seem to remember the first time you brought that theory up on this podcast, you immediately said, but it doesn't make sense because nobody else does it.
No, I don't believe it.
Well, I actually bought it when they were shooting the latches off because he's shooting into an explosive device. That's the only time it ever makes sense for him to be shielding his eyes.
Yeah. Well, so then Avon has Kilo contact his contacts. And
I wonder who those could be.
Oh, no. And Avon tells him what planet the meet on, Beta 5, I think it was? Or,
Yeah.
And I think Dana protests, like, it's Federation space. Dana, right? Dana Sulin protests and is like, that's Federation space. And Avon says, it's abandoned, empty, and on the edges, and no one's there. I highly doubt anyone's going to be there.
I really liked the design of this planet. I mean, I know it was
just a rock quarry.
I know it was just like a quarry
quarry.
But like in the background, you could see like sort of dust blowing around. It looked like there was sort of a dust cloud in the background, mini one or whatever. So I mean,
for a quarry, they did a pretty good job of making it look bigger. Though they found a really good place for the camera to be, so it doesn't feel like this little pit. There's obviously some telltale trees poking up, which kind of ruins the illusion, but. There is that first pan where they go and find Avon and then turn with him to the other characters that does sell this kind of wastelandy aspect to it.
Right.
There is actually a line that we forgot that I want to mention earlier, that the reason why they couldn't use the teleport to just teleport the gold off the Space Princess was because Orak points out that due to the processing that's been done to turn it gold, if they teleport it, it'll just turn to dust irrevocably.
Did you notice that like little snarky laugh that Peter Tuddenham does when Orak says this?
Yeah, he's like, no.
Orak's really just enjoying like taking the stuffing out of them on this episode.
Orak's getting snarkier and snarkier every episode. Pretty sure it's all Avon's fault, I'm being honest. I mean, Orak even sounds super snarky at the end of this, which we're going to get to in a little bit, where he's just like, haha, you guys did all this for nothing. But yeah, so it's Servalan.
Oh no, shock of shocks.
Like I said, the instant they showed a solid just shot of her heels getting out of the little transport, I was like, who else but Servalan would wear completely impractical heels on this desolate wasteland planet?
You just know that in the shots where you can't see her feet, they've got plywood underneath her so she doesn't fall over.
So she doesn't start like slowly sinking into the ground. Avon, I seem to be getting smaller.
Yeah. Poor. Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to talk to you guys about this at the end of the series.
Well, so basically Avon and Servalan have a little bant. They have some bants.
Avon has a gun to her head, but...
She just kind of pushes aside, be careful with that gun, Avon.
Right. Well, she says the guards were ordered to kill her.
Yeah, she's like, the guards are ordered to kill you first. I'm like, but how would they know that he's going to kill her? Like, he could have just pulled the trigger right then when he had the gun against her head, and the guards would have been totally unprepared.
Or like, Sulin could have just killed
gunned her down.
Yeah.
Dana could have.
Dana should have. Like I said, she should have just popped a bullet cacked her right there.
Yep.
I mean, that's the biggest problem with including Servalan in the story, is that nobody shoots her.
Just shoot her.
I mean, and we gave Tarrant a lot of guff last week for not shooting Servalan.
Yeah, but I mean, that also makes sense as well.
But that makes sense, sort of. This one makes less sense.
Yeah, I mean, normally I try and, come up with some theory as to why, but I don't know about this one.
I do like the last shot of her as they're leaving, and she's got that little smile on her face because she knows what we're about to learn from Orak.
The Scorpio crew leaves Kilo behind, and he's like, no, you can't leave me with her. And he's like, well, yeah, we can, and we will. So
then he says, Servalan, no, you can't leave me on this desolate planet. There's no food or water here. She's like, actually, I can, and I'm going to.
Yeah, and, well, the food and water doesn't matter to him.
Yeah, I mean, I got the impression, right, or you get the impression that they're gonna strand him there, but they actually just kill him.
Yeah.
Which is a more merciful thing to do.
Yeah, mercy killing, really. But they get back to the ship and they open this legitimate like treasure chest of 10,000.
It was like a briefcase.
It was like a treasure chest. This treasure chest of 10,000. I don't know what unit this is, credits or dollars or whatever.
It was Zerok money.
10
because
billion,
then they
sorry.
invalidate like.
Wait. Do you Xerox it to make more? No.
Yeah, there's 10 billion, and then who is it? Sulin
but it's
is
the size
like
of like 4 like American dollars, like stapled together. You know.
Sulin is like 2 million for each of us. Sorry, Villa. I don't know who it was.
This is Villa, I think.
Dana actually. It's like 2 million for each of
think
us
it was
because Dana's
Villa.
the one who tears it in half after she picks it up.
Villa is definitely like reaping the rewards in this scene. He's like, oh yeah.
Didn't do anything, getting all the rewards, and then Orak is like, so it turns out Zerok has been annexed into the Federation, and so all Zerok currency is worthless now. They're like, damn.
The Federation also now has the means to turn the black gold back into normal gold.
And then Tarrant is like, great, we just risked our lives. While Sulin says we risked our lives for nothing, but then Tarrant is like, no, we risked our lives to make Silverland rich. And Dana kind of shoves this torn up note into Avon's hand. And this
they
this
throw
scene,
like the money at Avon.
Sulin
like a
throws it.
handful of it.
Yeah, Sulin throws a big handful of it.
Yeah.
And it kind of rains down on him. But this scene where Avon just kind of smiles in like pain.
Shakes his fist.
He's crumpling the money in his fist and he's just smiling, but it's a smile of, ha ha, I freaking hate myself right now.
Okay, so I've seen this image before dozens of times probably, and what I always thought this was like Paul Darrow looking into the camera, his chin resting on his like closed fist with a smile on his face.
No.
Now that I know what it is, it's even better.
Yeah, no, because he's clearly like he's laughing at the irony, and at the same time you see all the tensions in his hand. That he's like he wants to scream, but he can only laugh.
Yeah, it's
great. It's
all my fault.
It's decidedly an awesome moment for Paul Darrow.
Yeah, there are some people who think this is when Avon totally loses his mind.
I wouldn't blame him.
Knowing what happens next week, knowing the basic plot outline of Orbit, yeah, I would agree with that.
It's like, I just made Servaland rich, and I got nothing. I didn't even get a snog. Let
got a
alone
bunch
what
of paper,
Tarrant
though.
got.
He got the experience, and isn't that all worth it?
Is it? Is it?
Nah, I don't know.
I would argue no. Well, so that's the end of the episode.
That's gold.
That's gold. Solid gold, baby.
It's solid gold for a Series D episode.
I think it's one of the best episodes of Series D.
I do
Up there
as
with
well.
Sand,
I do as well.
Headhunter.
Yeah, it's a great story. I mean, it's it's got the television production problems that sort of hamper it, but given when it was made and what the limitations it's made under, it's actually pretty damn good. I find it really watchable, and some of the other episodes I find somewhat less watchable.
Well, I mean, like you mentioned, it's the only real time Blake Seven has done
A heist.
in this literal of a way, and there are some really great like scenes in it where the tension is high and like you're totally invested. I don't know. I mean, like I was at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I was so attracted to it because I've done a lot of poking around in that particular genre. So I remember when I watched this, it really grabbed me. And so when you guys had the list of episodes that you still had no guests on, I jumped on this one because I went, yes, there's the one I want to talk about. It's right in my sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I really enjoyed watching this. I was super invested in it. Which has been pretty rare for Series D episodes.
If I had one general comment, I just wish it was a slightly better use of the whole group. It's a little You know, I mean, at least Sulin gets something to do and has some dialogue, you know, but it just sort of felt like, especially with Villa, that he was sort of underutilized, even to be the one who should be warning them, this isn't going to go the way you want, even if he stays on the ship and won't participate. I thought that was a miscalculation.
I mean, that's sort of a problem, I guess, with Blake 7 as a whole. You know, right from episode 1, that was the case, and it's still the case now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's something you have to try really hard to do, and to talk about that Lost in Development Hell heist movie I worked on. It's, you know, I had this problem. They had this huge cast of characters. I think there are like 5 thieves and these other characters. It's like this huge cast, and trying to keep it balanced and make sure everybody is involved and has an important role to do is really a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'm sure on a TV schedule, it's probably nearly impossible, you know, to do it. So to give, you know, the writers some credit there. Okay, Colin Davis, I'll give you a pass.
Well, that's. I mean, I guess that points to sort of a difference between a movie and a TV show,
right?
Which is that, you know, on TV it's a little, I think, more forgivable, or you're okay with it if like there's an episode where a character doesn't do much, because you know, okay, you know, maybe next episode or, you know, sometime later this character is going to have their episode, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas in a movie, maybe it's more of a balancing act.
Yeah. I think also writers have a tendency to write for the characters they like.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, that's a natural thing. I mean, like when I'm writing stuff, I always try to go back through when I reread it. I go, who really should be saying this line? You know, and I try to say, okay, even if I love that character or that actor, you know, you go, no, that really belongs to, you know, Dana, or that should belong to. Okay, no line belongs to Tarrant unless it's bad. But
I mean, to an extent, that's why Series A was a little questionable, because Terry Nation wrote every single episode and Chris Boucher edited every single episode. So, you know, Terry's going to give lines to his favorite characters, who appeared to be Blake and Jenna. You know, Chris is going to weasel in some lines for Avon, and then for the whole first season, Callie and Gan are just left, you know, standing metaphorically with their pants down, not doing anything in the corner, because like Terry and Chris are the ones controlling the show and they're writing for the characters they like, which is why I think Series B was a massive improvement, because we get all these other writers coming in, and you know, they're all going to obviously write for different characters they like and want to do something with.
It is a problem. It's like when J. Michael Straczynski decided to write all of Babylon 5 himself after the first year. Every script feels like a second draft. Nothing ever feels like a polished draft. It's always clumsy. You know, it's you know, you have to have when you're grinding out that level of material, you have to have a staff. It's just not possible for one person to do it. You know,
right.
As Terry Nation found out firsthand.
As Terry Nation found out literally 3 weeks in, he's like, "Oh God, what have I done?"
Yeah, and it's interesting because you can see that Blake 7, when it starts off, has the typical problem that a lot of shows do, is that you come up with a concept and you come up with a few stories to sell it, and then you burn through the ideas that came to you easily after 4 or 5 or 6 episodes, and then you're like, oh, now what?
Yeah.
You know, and I had somebody, I've argued this with people, and they say, oh, well, why don't they plan more? Because if you don't put a lot of effort into something, that may not fly. So even if you write a pilot, you don't write the outline for the whole season, because if the pilot doesn't get picked up, that work you've just done on plotting out those other episodes is, you know, wasted effort.
Right.
So it's this sort of catch-22. You know, you really should plan it out, but you can't plan it out, because if it doesn't fly, you have to work on the next thing. So television's a really tricky thing. I think people don't realize, you know, if they don't understand how the production process works, it's very easy to be critical. Oh, they should have done this. Well, yeah, you try doing this in 4 weeks and make all these things line up. Feature films, you have the luxury that I think, you know, people consider it a rush if you took you 6 months to write the first draft. You know, on a TV show, that's more like 6 weeks from the idea to it being on the stage.
Right. And sort of speaking, I guess, of all this production-y type stuff, I think in an email, Maurice, you mentioned, well, you definitely mentioned how much you liked the heist aspect of this episode, but you said, you know, if Blake 7 were to ever get rebooted, you know, and you had a chance to work on it or contribute to it, this is a direction you would want to take it, right? This sort of heist direction.
Yeah, I like the format because I think it they do this in other episodes. Like I said, like Power Play, there's that whole same thing. We have to get into this thing, and there's all these steps we have to do. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a good way to showcase characters, and it's kind of it's a good way to use the funny dialogue, and you can create a lot of tension, and you can do it on a fairly low budget without these big epic vistas and stuff. And I just thought it was an interesting way because I felt like the show is a little rudderless in this season, and if they'd gone forward, I think they could have used this kind of thing. Not that they're always trying to steal something every week, but that kind of basic Mission Impossible template, going there. You have you plan the gimmick out, then you have to improvise when it doesn't go right. Just no more Servalan.
So maybe a break-in, if not necessarily like a heist.
Yeah, it's what they call a caper,
Sure.
It's it's that kind of thing. So, because there's some really brilliant, caper movies out there where they have to figure out some really clever way to get past something. In fact, I forget, I was reading about this. There's a film where in the caper they silence an alarm. I think it might be Bob LaFleur. I'm trying to remember. I've watched so many heist movies where to stop this alarm from going off, they drill a hole in the alarm box and they spray foam inside it, which muffles it. And apparently somebody some years ago actually copied that and did that to a real alarm.
The truth is stranger than fiction.
Does art mimic life?
More like does life mimic art?
Yeah. So I mean, I know you guys are going to do the kind of I think you talked about doing a final episode. We're going to talk about where what they thought where the show should go if they went forward. So I think I would love to contribute to that when you get there. I don't know if you want people to write in for that or call in or how you want to handle that.
We've actually been typically having people write in, but actually it might be interesting if people want to
come up with a recording and
and send it into us.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. That way you don't have to read it and wear your voices out.
We wear our voices out every week, recording 2 podcasts a week.
Sometimes 3.
Sometimes 3. And sometimes these things go on for hours and hours and hours. One week we recorded I think when we recorded Rescue with Making Blake 7, we sat there for 2.5 hours to 3 hours recording, and then still recorded Trust Your Doctor after that. And at the end of it, I was like, I feel like my throat is on fire.
But we shouldn't
just
forget.
need to drink like Villa does, and then you'll be fine.
Maybe I should start drinking on this podcast.
Yeah.
I'm drinking right now, but it's coffee.
We should bring some wine to the final episode.
We shouldn't forget how Terry Nation would.
How Terry Nation would do gold.
Gold.
He wouldn't.
You think
gold.
He wouldn't?
Controversial opinion.
He
I don't
did
think he
Mission
would.
Destiny. I think he would have done it. I don't think it would have been the same script, but I mean,
I'm going to go with the controversial thing Keon said a couple weeks ago that Servalan wouldn't appear in this script at all.
I think you're right about that. Because the only note, I don't know a lot of Terry Nation stuff outside of Blake 7, but that was sort of my impression too. I don't think Servalan would have been as front and center had he been there, or even in there at all. I think it would have been. I think Keeler would have been the ultimate twist. There would have been something about him we find out at the end, but no Servalan.
I think Travis could have been in this because we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks of this alternate Series D where Travis and Servalan.
Terry Nation keeps trying to bring back Travis.
Right, or where Travis and Servalan are not working together and then, mid-season they team up again or something like that.
Yeah, and it's not even out of the realm of possibility that Travis would survive. I mean, Servalan survived the Liberator freaking blowing up in space. Travis just fell down a tube, so...
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's a pretty interesting observation because when you look at especially early Travis in Series A, he did do these elaborate plans to try to lure Blake, and so it would be right in his zone to do something like that, except for the make the money angle, at the end because he doesn't care about that.
I could almost see Keeler being replaced by Travis, and then that's why he calls Avon an old friend, and Avon's like, we're not old friends because Dana, Sulin, Tarrant, none of these people actually know who he is.
Only Villa and Avon.
Only Villa and Avon would know, and that's why Villa might stay behind on the ship is because he's skeptical of, Travis's, quote, change of heart, unquote, and Avon's going along with it because he thinks maybe this is a way to get to Servalan.
Right, and then having Servalan kill Travis at the end instead of having him just fall down a tube. That could have been so good.
That would have been a big twist. And I could totally see Terry Nation doing that. Like, if Terry Nation knew this was going to be the final season and, we're coming up at the end of the season, Terry Nation coming in, bringing back Travis as his great, crowning achievement. And then at the end of the episode, Servalan kills him. To just start wrapping up loose ends definitively. Travis is dead now by Servalan's hand.
Yep.
Yeah, those are the fun things when you have those kind of unexpected betrayals and stuff. Those are fun. I do want to add one thing I forgot to mention is that, it's funny when they went to all the trouble in Series A at the end of Series A to introduce Orak and his oracular abilities, and then which they immediately backpedaled on because you can't have him predicting the future. But they're doing this complicated thing and nobody consults Orak to ask him the odds or anything. He just happens to be turned on so he can make snarky comments.
Yeah, I guess they just leave him on now. They're just like, well, we'll just leave Orak on because he's funny.
Well, you can always tell when they set it up because you could hear the Orak noise in the background all under the scene. He's conveniently off and something is that little. I'm going, Orak's going to say something in this scene.
That actually reminds me of something I wanted to say, that sound design in this episode was great because they gave the Scorpio guns and they gave Keeler's guns different gun sounds that they're similar because they are similar in construction and make, but they're noticeably different. And I thought that was a really good creative choice.
Yeah, I love the endless, fingers on chalkboard music that plays whenever we're on this ship.
Forgot about that. I also
and then, whenever the purser's door opens, you can hear it coming in.
We didn't mention it either, but I love the shot where the Scorpio is flying alongside the Space Princess, and it looks like they're coming straight towards the camera.
Kind of like the shot that used to be in the opening sequence about the Liberator flying straight towards the camera.
Yeah, these shots are, okay, there's a little wobbliness on the models in some shots, but, it's only the CSO compositing of them on the starfields that makes those shots not as great as they could be, and, well, I understand why that is.
Yeah.
Damn CSO.
Damn
Throwing
CSO.
a wrench in everything again.
To you Americans listening, we mean blue screen/green screen.
Isn't CSO a slightly different process?
Similar but different.
It's a chroma key type process.
Yeah.
It's just it's all still built of color replacement process.
Yeah. What about that time they used yellow on Doctor Who, I think, and it came out really badly because it started fringing all of the people's faces at the edges.
On video, you can key on any color. It's just a color value. On film, there's a particular reason about why they used blue, which I won't get into because I'd probably bore everybody with all the technical aspects of that.
I mean, I'm actually curious to hear, but...
Well, when we hang up on this, I'll explain it to you.
Okay.
I'll explain it to you, Lucy. So anyway, so I want to sum up on this thing. I think for me in this episode, which I really enjoy, it's probably my favorite Series D episode just for entertainment value, even though I think there are other stories that have more, meat to them. For me, the pluses are the complicated caper, the character of Keeler and the actor playing him, that Sulin gets stuff to do, and Orak kicking the stuffing out of them with his reveal. And to me, the minuses are Servalan, the clumsy direction and editing, which tend to undermine the dramatic tension, and the criminal, pun intended, underuse of Villa. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with all of that. I think this is a good story. Actually, it's a great story. Definitely top 3 of the season. And I think there are definitely some wasted opportunities, I think is the phrase.
Yeah, I agree. I really like this one. I do like Sand better. And I'm going to say, I think if this episode were put up against a Series A, B, or C, or mixed in with those episodes, or somehow, part of those seasons, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much. I think I enjoyed this one because we've been getting a lot of not great eepisodes recently.
Yeah, I would put it kind of on the level, if you put it that way, to a mission of destiny. I don't want to get I don't want to get that middle word right. That 2-letter word, mission to destiny. It's kind of that thing. It's that little oddball off format thing, but it's kind of entertaining in its own right. But I think it's better than Mission to Destiny.
I would say so.
I mean, I would have to watch them together.
It's been a while since I saw Mission to Destiny.
At the same time, but.
But I remember thinking that episode was pretty mediocre.
Well, you didn't like 5, 4. What was it? 5, 4, 1, 2, 4. You didn't like that reveal?
So we have an email this week if you'd like to join us in responding to it, Maurice.
Oh, sure. I'll be happy to critique other people's critiques.
From Sergeant Drano, who will be joining us next week for the third of 3 crossovers in a row. Whew.
Wow, I feel envious.
Anyway, from Sergeant Drano, subject line Gold. Hey guys, so Gold, or should we call this one Ocean's 7? A heist episode, yeah, it's a trope, but heists do tend to make for some entertaining viewing, don't they? I really like seeing the Scorpio docked to the nation-esquely named Space Princess. Scorpio's bigger than I thought. Sulin gets to flex her gunslinger muscles in this one, fast drawing on 2 guards, after which Avon clarifies Sulin killed them both. Noise. It's fun how Villa gets to play the heavy for a bit. Keeler seems like he's afraid of this mysterious Villa guy. Did you buy that Avon and Sulin were dead at all? I bet not.
No.
I found it hard to take notes while the actual heist was happening because it was so engaging. Good stuff. Love Tarrant and Dana's drugged up acting. Keeler's a pretty complex character, seems affable and harmless, but doesn't hesitate to shoot that doctor in cold blood. I like it. Avon really seems to enjoy gunning down those guards. See attached. Pretty sweet moment when he almost gets sucked out of the transfer tube. See attached. I love the turnabout at the handoff. I suspected Servalan would be involved, but I didn't expect that Avon had already figured that out and actually gets the drop on her. And watching Avon and Servalan flirt with each other, it's so delicious and skeevy at the same time. It makes me cringe and laugh. See attached. Tarrant, I've never seen currency of that size. Lol, those are some pretty big pieces of paper, aren't they? But in the end, they all get completely schooled by Servalan, all that effort, and they end up with nothing and make Servalan richer, and we get Avon descending into insane laughter. Could this be the moment when he finally loses it at the rest of the way? See attached. What other series would take their characters in a direction like this? I think this is a real cracker of an episode. Full marks 7 out of 7, however, due to the newly enacted Federation laws, those 7s are now worthless. Sergeant Trader Station 7 the door.
How big are wallets on Zerok?
Yeah, I mean, given the size of those bills, like the physical size of those bills.
Well, they're big money. It's big money. These aren't G's. They're, what's the next letter up? Gigabyte?
H.
Grand.
I mean, it's kind of weird. I'm imagining that this currency system makes their bills like physically bigger as the denomination gets bigger.
I think that used to be I think that's still the case in some countries. I mean, U.S.
Yeah, but not to this extent. Nobody's walking around with giant squares that are bigger than their face, right?
Well, it prevents you from carrying them around because people will mug you for them.
Yeah, it becomes really difficult to hide.
I wonder what's printed on that money, or if it's something that was already laying around that they just printed large, or I know, like, one of the funny things in the history of Hollywood, if you look at old movies, and a lot of movies still, the money they would use was actually Mexican money because there were laws against duplicating or even creating any kind of thing that looks like a real bill.
Yeah.
So I wonder if those things are some existing printed something or other,
I don't know, actually. I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, I mean, these also look, I think, different enough from... Well, actually, I don't really know what British money looks like, although I've seen it before.
Well, not giant squares, I can tell you that much.
I think they're multicolored. I don't even remember.
Some countries have plastic money. So...
Yeah.
I think
It
Australia
would be
has
funny if it was
plastic
plastic money and Dana tried to tear it and it just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Well, even still, it's like really difficult to tear American bills.
Yeah,
I don't know if
well,
you've tried, but
American bills are like partially fabric.
Yeah, it's like a fabric paper kind of hybrid.
Yeah.
Not
yeah.
impossible.
Not plastic, though,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
bummer. The nice thing about plastic is that it doesn't get dirty. You can just run it under the sink and clean it if it does. So... Anyway, yeah, thank you for emailing us,
thanks.
Sergeant Drano. A lot of good insight there.
I have no comments except that, yeah.
Except that, yeah. All right, we got 3 emails to respond to this week. They're all rather long, so the responses may not
Be as extensive
as
as they usually
usual.
are.
But we want to make sure that we get them in here. 2 of them are from people who have never reached out to us before. This first one, the subject line, Zenith Podcast. Hello, I really like the Zenith Podcast and will miss them when you've finished. I only came in halfway through, so I'm looking forward to listening to Series 1 and 2. I also listened to the Blake 7 and Character podcast, and I enjoy the contrast between the 2 older British blokes who have been familiar with the series forever, and you guys being much younger, American, and coming to the show for the first time. I'll be especially interested to hear what you say about Sand as it and Star One are my two favorite episodes. There's an audio interview on YouTube where Jacqueline Pierce discusses what happened when Stephen Pacey found out she had just moved next door to him and how Tantley wrote into her script. See Serler and Jacqueline Pierce interview Blake 7 on channel Maxi Power 2008. My favorite characters are Villain Callie or Avon and Serverland, depending on what sort of mood I'm in. Have you heard the rumor that Terry Nation was hoping that Aurak could be aggressively marketed like the Daleks were and was therefore disappointed that the final Aurak prop didn't have any legs? The mind boggles. I've listened to all the Big Finish Blake 7 audios, and as you'd hope, they attempt to fill in and flesh out many of the character traits and backstories that are missing from the original series, such as Jenna's smuggling background, Villa's early life, various relatives appear, such as Jenna's brother, I assume you mean, Villa's father, and the like. Villa's father? There's an awesome scene in one story where Villa is emboldened by means of a telepathic link and flirts brazenly with an outraged Servland, except that my brother ruined it by saying that it sounded like an argument in an old people's home. I also recommend two books in particular. Firstly, Liberation by Alan Stevens and Fiona Moore, which has in-depth intellectual and cultural analyses of every episode, and includes such observations as Nation reportedly intended Bounty to be a comment on the late 90s-70s peacekeeping activities in the Middle East, making the portrayal of the Amazons as gangster Arab types even more unfortunate. Secondly, quote, Maximum Power, and quote from MIWK Publishing, which is full of non-intellectual observations. For instance,
milk, as John pointed out. But it's fine. Go on.
But it's a W, not an L.
Yeah, but I think it's pronounced as milk. That's what John said.
For instance, in Voice from the Past, when Travis is disguised as the bandaged Siobhan, they note that Travis is so stupid, he's even put his fake eye over his good eye. How can he see anything? And Reassassin, Cancer's death scene is not only the highlight of the series, but of the BBC's output since its inception ever. And there's a lot of hilarious bullshit, including a summary of the Japanese remake of the show, which allegedly features this super fun oppression squad, whose members include Man Woman, Jan, Mr. Gan with an exploding head, and the voice of a baby in the evil computer Oraculatron. I know you have been spoiled on the final episode, but I've seen it countless times and I still find it shocking, so brace yourselves. Thanks for the podcast. Cheers, Maxi, Melbourne. P.S. When Dodo got a cold in the Ark, it was sadder than when Gan died.
I'm still not over Gan's death.
Yeah, you are. It's just
No,
a meme now. It's just a meme to be not over Gan's death. Just a meme.
Nah, I don't think so. But I've heard of this book, Liberation.
Mm-hmm.
Spacefall podcast often references this book, and it sounds really cool. Like pretty much every Blake 7 publication, you'd have to import it over here, but
right.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting.
I didn't hear the rumor that Terry Nation was hoping to market Aurak aggressively. That's a new one.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one either.
But like you said, it's a rumor, so
Rumor of
unsubstantiated. Rumor of death.
You also have to think, like, is Aurak really marketable or as marketable as the Daleks?
Would it have ever been? No matter what it was designed to look like. Probably not. Interesting hearing your opinion on the Blake 7 audios. We'll only be listening to one for this podcast, so...
As of right now, I mean, we left it open, as to whether or not we were going to continue on, but it's probably, It's probably, we're just going to watch The Way Ahead and be done with
listen to The Way Ahead.
Yeah, listen to it.
Maybe we should watch that Japanese remake. Otherwise, thank you for the email, Maxi. Really appreciate hearing from you in the final waning days of our podcast. Yeah. Our next email comes from John of Making Blake 7. Subtitled The Sarcophagus Review / Gisette Simon. Hi guys, I've been enjoying your ongoing voyage through Series D. However, there was one aspect of your recent Sarcophagus review that I feel I should correct, namely Gisette Simon and her feeling about Dana and Blake 7 in general. Before I read the rest of this, I want to say that most of what you're about to say we actually got with RG in our episode on Sand. I think this arrived like the weekend Sand went out, so it didn't make it into that episode. But anyway, when Gisette Simon appeared at the recent Cygnus Alpha convention, she told us that she was never fond of the part of that she has never found the part of Dana racially problematic, and she never felt that the writing was sexist or racially stereotyped. Not at the time and not now. In her own words, we were all part of the crew and we were all equals. Gisette was a little exasperated because she has never complained about sexism or racism in Blake 7, and she doesn't know where these rumors started. And she also pointed out that Dana was not written as a, quote, black character, unquote, and Gisette hates the term, quote, black actress, unquote. Gisette spoke very fondly of her time on the series. She said Blake 7 has a very special place in my affections. The only reason she has never revisited Dana is because she always wants to move forward and embrace new challenges rather than looking back and revisiting a part she played almost 40 years ago. The amazing success she has had in her character suggests that she made the right choice. I just wanted to set you straight on this, as Gisette is keen to squash these rumors and you don't want to annoy Dana. She's been known to hold a grudge. Kinky face. Cheers, John, making Blake 7. Cheers, John.
Yeah, thank you definitely for that correction.
Yeah, don't want to do what Maurice was talking about in this episode, spreading rumors and misinformation. Right. So that's greatly appreciated from you, John. But like I said, I think we cleared up some of that in our episode on sand, which you may not have listened to when you sent this email. But it's always good to...
No, but we didn't point out her comments at the convention. And
it's always good to reinforce with actual comments by the actress. So thank you very much. And the next email is actually also about that. A subject line about Gisette Simon and Blake 7 Sand podcast. This one's about sand. Hi, guys. This person was also at Cygnus Alpha. John and this person may have run into each other and may not have even known it. That would be really weird. Hi, guys. I'm enjoying your podcast. Have listened to the most of them by now. In Sand, there's been a question about Gisette Simon, which I can answer after being on her panel at Cygnus Alpha 4.0 convention this October. The question was, why didn't she do any big finish? Also, there was a talk that she didn't like her part in Blake 7, and that's the reason that she didn't do conventions, etc. She answered it at her panel, which was absolutely wonderful. I wrote a bit about it here, and there's a link, which we'll put in the show notes. She said that 1, she loves Blake 7 and is hurt when people imply that she hates it for some reason. 2, she never repeats any of her parts. She wants to move on to new challenges after being done. That's why she would never do Blake 7 big finish or reprise any of her other parts. 3, she is a very private person. That's why she's not comfortable with conventions in general, as people expect convention guests to chat about their private lives. But she gave absolutely gorgeous, warm, and honest talk at Cygnus Alpha while keeping it mostly about her work. It's her second Blake 7 convention. The first one was a year ago. She might do more after this, I hope. Hope that helps, and all the best, Natalia. Wow, we got 2 emails from Cygnus Alpha about Gisette Simon. But it's like I said, it's always good to reinforce the correct information. I guess is the point here.
Yeah, so thank you.
So thank you, and we'll put a link to the writing that you linked. And thank you for reaching out, Natalia. Always good to hear from new people, too, on the podcast. Kind of weird that we got an email from both John and Natalia about Cygnus Alpha. But, guess it was right time, right place, right person. Basically, we're asking for our fans to, and even if you're not a fan of Zenith, you can email us, I guess.
Yeah, anyone. Email, Facebook, Twitter, or leave a comment on the website.
Just, kind of pitching your fantasy version of Blake 7, like fantasy football, but for Blake 7. Who do you want playing the characters? Who would you have doing script editing, producer, whatever you want?
Story ideas. And you can set this in an alternate history where Series E happened, I guess, or like a reboot or something. You can do whatever you want. Or
like from the 80s, like in the era of Blake 7, if you could cast anyone, who would do it? If you could draw from any era, who would you cast?
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want with it, really. Like, it's very open-ended, and it's open-ended intentionally.
Right.
And on our final episode, which we'll be releasing the week after The Way Ahead, we'll be releasing one final wrap-up episode for Zenith. On that episode, we'll be going over people's fantasy kind of Blake 7. We'll be pitching our own as well.
Yeah. And just reflecting on the podcast.
Just reflecting on the podcast and the show and looking back fondly on what we've done. Looking back fondly on how we burned ourselves out.
So again, the 4 sort of channels you can pitch your idea on, or email, Facebook, Twitter, and leaving a comment on the website.
And unless any of us have any other thoughts on this episode, I think
that's it for me.
Wraps it up. So Maurice, if there's anything you'd like to shamelessly plug, that you're working on, this is your opportunity.
I'm working on a podcast with my friend Michael Komet, who does the absolutely fascinating Star Trek Fact Check blog, which has been quoted and recommended by Den of Geek and the American Press Institute twice. Wow. And he has been doing this blog for some years. He is sort of a TV historian. He's been going through Gene Roddenberry's papers at UCLA and very intricately going through them. So we've been reading the actual production documents from the original Star Trek, and we are going to be doing a podcast that is so meticulously researched. We have endnotes that are pages long on this, and we cite everything we're citing. We tell you exactly what document or source it comes from. It's a huge amount of work, but we're hoping it'll be really interesting because we're getting a lot into what the general television history is. We're trying to set the show in the context of what the television and cultural landscape were of the period, and which is, a lot of people talk about these shows, but they don't know what was going on or what the state of the art in TV was, which is something like when you guys talk about like comparing something to Doctor Who, what was going on, like what was going on in British TV at the time. If you don't know what was happening in 60s television really and what the trends were, you don't understand like necessarily why the show is the way it is. And it's been really fascinating. It's fun to poke into these documents and see the actual thinking and see the snarky memos going back and forth, or Gene Roddenberry chewing out two of the writers for being too snarky in their memos, because then he has to rewrite them before he can share them with the writers and stuff like that. And it's just really fascinating stuff. So yeah, but we don't have a title for it yet. So when I do, I'll let you know. But anybody who's interested in the subject should check out the Star Trek Fact Check blog. If you Google it, you'll find it, because he's done a bunch of deconstructions, like really deep dives into a lot of the mythology of the show, and where certain books that claim to be experts on the subject ain't.
Yeah,
so that's my plug.
Yeah, sounds really cool. I mean, I'm not even like a Star Trek fan. I've never watched Star Trek, but that sounds really, really interesting.
Maybe
something I will
start.
check out if I ever watch the show.
Star Trek podcast when?
Well, the thing we were trying to do is we wanted to come up with a podcast that hadn't been boldly beaten to death like every other podcast had gone before. So we decided, okay, let's come at it from a real historical research perspective, and let's just come at it that way, because it's like we listen and we bump into these other podcasts and other commentaries, and people basically make up crap. Every week somebody makes up some thing where they misremember. It's like a game of telephone. They repeat a story and they change it again, and getting to what really happened is so difficult sometimes.
I mean,
and I'm sure some of that happens in the more popular shows. I'm sure there's a similar amount of mythology around Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we're definitely guilty of that.
Yeah, we're guilty of it for sure.
Yeah, whereas I think like with Blake 7, there's probably less of that because it's, not as widely seen. And that's one of the reasons I really appreciate the Making Blake 7 Twitter feed and everything, because I love seeing this stuff. I love the behind the curtain, look into how things happened and why they happened.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why don't we see Travis's face all through that episode? Oh, because it's not him.
Yeah.
But somebody answer me this. Why don't they put a bullet in Servalan's head?
The age-old question, why didn't they shoot Servalan? The question that should never be asked.
Haunted the world since 81.
Oh, well, that all sounds very interesting, so thank you for...
Thank you, and thanks for having me on. I was quite honored to be invited.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And
forward to hearing the summing up episodes and catching up and hearing what you think of the show at the end.
Oh, it's going to be interesting. 3 more weeks.
Yep.
3 more episodes.
All right.
Closing in on us.
And if you would like to email us, any of you dear listeners, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Solid Gold. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Zenith, a Blake 7 podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. And like we mentioned, next time we're going to be joined again by Sergeant Reno to discuss Orbit. But until then,
Orbit.
The end.